Hello again and welcome to another GCSE Computer Science Theory lesson. This video is going to be on Unit 6, Penetration Testing and Protection. So let's start off with defining what penetration testing is. So it is when you want to hire somebody to deliberately hack into your own computer system in order to test its security. Well, why would anybody want to pay money to get their system hacked? Well, there's a few ways of looking at this. Well, if you've got security vulnerabilities, sometimes the best way to secure yourself is to actually ask somebody to hack your system for you. You might as well hire one of the hackers out there to hack your system first with your consent before somebody else does it with malicious purposes. In terms of the AQA exam, we need to know about two different types of penetration testing. One of them is called white box, the other is called black box. So white box is when the tester or the hacker that you've employed simulates a malicious insider to your organization. With black box testing, it is when the hacker or the tester simulates a malicious outsider. Now you're probably thinking, what on earth does insider and outsider mean? Well, hopefully I'll try and explain that with some examples on the next slide. So let's take an example of a white box tester for a school network. So in a school network, a tester is employed to see what damage a student can do to a school network. The tester is given some details about a student's user account. So we're white box testing, we're simulating a malicious insider. So with a school network, one of the insiders to that organization would be a student. So we've hired this person with the intent of finding out how much damage a malicious student could do to our network. With black box testing, we would employ somebody to simulate an outsider to our organization, and that's just anyone who's not part of the school community. Because they're not part of the school community, there are no user accounts, there are no details given to the tester. Next, we'll talk about malware protection. Now, I've put this one in those little stars around it because they aren't necessarily things that are likely to come up in the exam, but I wanted to mention them because I felt they were important and they could come up. So these topics aren't necessarily going to come up in the exam. You might not need to quote these things verbatim, but they're good to know anyway. So ways that you can protect yourself, how you can protect yourself against malware. Well, the most obvious one is anti-malware software. This is commonly and incorrectly referred to as antivirus software. In my opinion, the most effective way to protect an organization from malware is just to train your users, just to give a bit of education to the people on your network. So, for example, social engineering is one of the biggest entry points to exploiting security in a network. Well, in order to protect yourself against social engineering, you need to train your staff against it. You need to be able to train your staff, don't believe everything you read in your emails. Learn how to spot farming websites, for example. So another way you can protect an organization against malware is by using email and website filtering. So you could filter out email addresses that are known for sending out phishing scams or containing links to malicious websites. And also you could block those malicious websites in the first instance. So you could block any IP addresses or websites associated with malicious software. So another method of protecting your system is just to update your operating system. As I've mentioned in a previous lesson, Windows XP is incredibly outdated and susceptible to viruses and security exploits. Well, to resolve that, just stay updated, use the latest operating system available. A common method that we see more these days are by putting restrictions on what users can do. So, for example, where I work, students are not allowed to install programs. They're not even allowed to execute files on their computer. It's inconvenient, yes, but it does mean that students can't accidentally install any malware. And finally, many organizations block USB devices in their offices. So many companies, you can't actually plug in your USB drives because they won't do anything. And this stops people from accidentally or deliberately bringing in malicious code from other sources. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the 5 types of protection that the exam board wants you to know about, and questions that they certainly will and can ask you about in the exam. So that's biometrics, password systems, captcha, two-step validation, and software updates. So starting off with biometrics. So biometrics is the act of using unique human characteristics to authenticate access. Now that sounds quite fancy. Simply put, we're talking about things like facial detection, using fingerprints to unlock your phones, maybe even using retinal scanners if it's some kind of CIA fancy kind of scenario going on. Biometrics are really, really fancy. They have their problems, but they're pretty effective against protecting against weak passwords and shouldering. Well, you don't have the problem with weak passwords because there are no passwords. Somebody can't simplify their fingerprints or make their face easy to copy, can they? So the whole weak passwords thing is no longer an issue, and shouldering is no longer an issue. You can't really look over somebody's shoulder and take a copy of their fingerprints. Well, actually, there's a few people out there who claim they've copied people's fingerprints from HD photographs, but as far as AQA is concerned, you can't really peek over somebody's shoulder and copy their fingerprints. Okay, password systems. So password systems are a very popular way of enforcing security in a computer system. It's the act of making sure that people use strong passwords. So for example of password systems are minimum length, complexity, and history requirements. So when we say minimum length, a lot of organizations don't allow you to have a password less than 8 characters. Many organizations insist that you have at least one uppercase letter, a number, and a symbol. And when we talk about history requirements, a lot of organizations require that you change your password once a month. A history requirement would stop you from using the same password over and over again. Now, using decent password systems, including history requirements, could protect you against, well, weak passwords, that's an obvious one, but also shouldering. If somebody looks over your shoulder and is able to copy your password and write it down, well, if your organization is following some strict history requirements, you're going to change your password in a month's time. So if somebody does catch you typing in your password, well, if your organization enforces that you change your password once a month, that's going to try and mitigate some of those issues. Next, we'll talk about CAPTCHA. Okay, CAPTCHA. What are they for? You've probably seen these things on various websites. It's to stop bots from creating spam account and content on websites. Why have I put bots in quotation marks? Well, when we refer to bots on the internet, it's really just software. It's just some malicious code that some hackers have made that automatically create web accounts and content. But why are spam accounts and spam content a bad thing? Well, first of all, they're annoying. Second of all, it's going to clog up any web servers with unnecessary data. But thirdly, that spam, the spam itself, could be harmful. So, for example, spam accounts tend to spread and deploy malware, which other people might be inclined to accidentally download. Here's another example of one of the more modern style captchas that you see these days. And finally, we'll talk about two-step validation. So two-step validation is just when you use your email or your mobile phone to verify a login. This is good because it protects against weak passwords. Well, why does it protect against weak passwords? Well, if your password is rubbish, well, at least you've got your email or your phone to try and mitigate that. Also, shouldering, it's going to protect against that. If somebody happens to write down your password, or somebody watches you type in your password, well, at the very least, they might not be able to access your email address or copy any codes on your mobile phone, maybe. And finally, two-step validation protects very well against bots. And again, when I say bots, I just mean some malicious code that is designed to make lots of user accounts on a website or for an organization. By using that two-step validation, it's going to make things more difficult for the programmer who makes these bots. Oh, sorry, this is the final slide, I promise. Software updates. Well, as we've already talked about in a previous lesson, software updates, they fix software vulnerabilities. If you fix your vulnerabilities, then you're not going to have those security holes that can be exploited. So it gets as simple as that, really. If you're interested, there is this really interesting website. Oops, now you can all tell that I'm a pirate. There's this really interesting website called CVE Details, and it's just an entirely community-maintained database that lists all known security vulnerabilities in common software, including Windows 10. So there you have it. So sometimes people can exploit these known security issues before Microsoft has had a chance to fix the software. So if you're interested in hacking, it might be worth giving this website a look into.